All right. Welcome, everybody. We are live, I believe. We are live as live can be. So this should be a lot of fun. Let's see if we can figure this out here, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Eric Lopez here. This is the In the Circle preview selection Sunday preview show. And we'll see here momentarily. We'll be joined by Justin McLeod momentarily. And hope to Victor Anderson as well. In fact, there's Justin now. Oh, I've never been happier to see Justin in my visual. How you doing?
I'm all right, man. How about you?
Doing all right. We are a few minutes late, but better than not, because we've been working on our projections, and we're going to try to talk some Field of 64. Oh, there's Vic. How you doing, Vic? Oh boy.
Hey, what's up?
Yeah, there you go. All right, boys. Good to
tease. Well, that I was trying to shotgun on my channel fouls.
There you go. All right. So we're live. So we're going to spend a little time here to kind of get you set for Selection Sunday with who's in, who's out, who's seeding, and much more here. As pretty much we have every game done, right, Justin? We have every game pretty much finished.
Pretty much. There's a couple that are going to tomorrow and Big Ten MAC kind of thing, but it's I don't want to call them inconsequential. They're important to those teams, but inconsequential for tournament purposes.
All right, and then Victor, you're going to be reading the chat. So obviously, any questions that are sent our way, where can they send it? Oh, did Vic freeze? Oh, he froze. Froze in the big moment. There he is. Vic's definitely having internet issues over there in his place. Justin, you sound great, though.
Well, thank you. So I know you're saying that about the internet issues, but I'm going to take a compliment.
All right. Well, we're going to get you some questions here, but let's get into this Field of 64. The Saturday, an incredible week of softball here. Make sure you can comments during our YouTube live show. You can also send it on Twitter at In the Circle SB, as well as our Facebook page. And we're going to kind of give you an idea what we think is going to happen here on the Field of 64.
Yeah, I am.
You doing good? You know, I think what Vic's going through. Well, what Vic's going through
those issues.
Yeah. Oh yeah. See, Vic is kind of going through what the Division II softball season has been like. It's been kind of a little messed up, a little bizarre, a little kind of technical issues. So, we're going to do. All right. So let's get into this now here. The Field of 64 will be announced 9 o'clock Eastern Sunday night. First time in 2 years we've had a selection show. That's exciting. What's the biggest question you have, Justin, for Selection Sunday night?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest question is how does the committee see the Big Ten? That's relevant to Michigan as a potential host. It's relevant to how many teams does the Big Ten get in. I mean, there's other questions, sure, but the question of how does the committee see the Big Ten? How do they view them?
I've
been like in the committee room.
Let's rest it in.
Go ahead, Justin.
Well, I mean,
y'all go ahead.
All right. I think for me it's the Big Ten because it's just normally you would look at the Big Ten and you would see, they're going to get 4 or 5 teams in. You're going to have Michigan and Minnesota, Northwestern. You might have Iowa. You might have Illinois, Nebraska, Wisconsin, Ohio State. So many teams that you could talk about. And this year, the question is, okay, maybe Michigan hosts. Michigan gets in. Minnesota gets in. Maybe somebody else gets in. It's a completely different conversation. And the way the committee views the Big Ten honestly has an impact on the entire bubble because, normally we have more bubble spots this year because you have fewer Big Ten spots. It's a crazy changeover that one conference can do that. But to me, that's the biggest question going into tomorrow.
I agree. The Big Ten is going to be a hot topic either way. Either they're going to get either only maybe 2 bids and people are going to be upset in Big Ten country, or they're going to get 3 to 4 bids and people are going to be upset about that. That is going to be the boiling point. And then you mentioned Michigan is one of the considerations to host. Will they get to host or will they have to travel? I think will be a fascinating storyline. I can tell you, as we've worked on this now for the last few days, and Justin, tell the audience where they can find my latest projections and all the details that come with it, because I know come Sunday morning we'll have our final projections.
So Bracketology 8.0 will be out Sunday morning, which will be the full breakdown, the latest projections. And Bracketology 8.1, which is the free edition with just the regional projections, will come out simultaneously. But that'll be, you go to justinsworldsb.com, and it'll be right there at the top to greet you bright and early on Sunday morning. And all of the previous projections that we've done pretty close to week by week through the last, I guess, 2 months now, are also there. There's a special section just for bracketology, and then all the newest stuff, our bubble watch that we've updated 1,000 times since Tuesday is there. But it's justinsworldsb.com.
That's right. A lot of details there. We'll kind of talk about some of those here in this show here. We'll probably be on until about maybe 10 o'clock Eastern. But again, if you got questions, make sure you send it on In the Circle SB on Twitter. Make sure you got the chat room here as well. I've gotten some questions already. We'll address it down the road. All right, let's begin with Saturday here. The results: Alabama beats Florida to win the SEC championship. Oklahoma rules past Oklahoma State to win the Big 12. Wichita State beats UCF to win the America. Duke beats Clemson to win the ACC tournament title. Which of those is your biggest key, your most interesting story of Saturday?
Well, I mean, Duke's the cheap answer, the easy answer, but I don't know that for me it's the reason that it was for other people. Obviously, you've got the storyline. Okay, it's the new program. It's the new program beating the other new program. You know, the fact that they beat Clemson is historic. But for me, when I tried to predict who the 20 potential host sites would be, I thought Duke was in the mix. Well, Duke for me was I guess the first one out. They were not included in that top 20, and now they're the ACC champions. So not only is Duke's title historic, not only does it set them up to be really big storylines in the NCAA tournament, but for me, the question then becomes, okay, is Duke going to be the biggest casualty of the predetermined host sites? Because sure, it could have been this team or it could have been this team, where you could have said, well, it's the Cajuns or James Madison or a mid-major. But Duke is sitting here as a Power 5 conference champion in the top 20 in RPI, and they're not included. So to me, that's a big storyline from Duke, because now, I mean, truth be told, I don't see any way there can be a higher seat or higher level 2 seed into a regional. And there's certainly every other conference champion in the Power 5 is going to be, playing at home. So that was a big piece of that storyline for me.
Yeah, I think the Duke factor, I thought that was it's tough when you do this weeks in advance. At the time when they announced this, Duke was kind of struggling a little bit, but they finished on fire. And I think that's the flaw. This is not a normal year, but I think in normal years, that's why you're not going to see these revealed until literally selection night. And I think you're right. I think if they had to do it over again, they would have put Duke in over Georgia in the list of 20, in my opinion. And, but it is what it is. And Duke's played very well to make that happen from a hosting standpoint. I personally think going through this, that this is going to be a hard tournament to seed. Because of the blurry numbers with the RPI, with teams like Villanova, for example, in the 30s RPI, they just won the Big East tournament. And, we'll see what happens with that. Now, you teams like South Dakota State's in the 30s. You have GW in the 30s. How do they handle that? Are they 3s or are they 4s? Then you got some teams that are 2s that maybe are 3s. And that's good. I think the seeding of the tournament, and that applies to host the top 16, I think is the bigger story this year than even the bubble. I think the bubble, and there's always a surprise, but I feel like the field itself this year is pretty simple because of the weak bubble. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the fact that we have a weak bubble, and in part that's buoyed by the absence of the Big Ten, because normally you would have 67, 68 teams that really make a lot of sense. You take out some of those teams because of the Big Ten, you're down to 64, maybe 65. But the top 16, honestly, the fact that they have narrowed it down to these 20 so early on, and you're trying to have to choose, the committee is, and of course we've been doing it with bracketology, trying to pick of those 20 to 16, instead of saying, okay, who are the top 16 teams right now, who makes the sense to host, it's weighing the qualities of maybe the team for 15 versus the team for 18 and saying, okay, which one of these should host? You're weighing factors against one another in a defined group, and I think that makes it so much more interesting, because it's not as if, okay, well, you've got Duke and Virginia Tech and Florida State and Clemson. Let's pick 3 of those 4. You only have 3 of those, and that's just an example, mind you. But you have 3 of those that you can weigh. You're weighing every factor against one another. And I think that, to your point, is what makes the top 16 and the seeded and hosting teams so interesting this year.
We got Sean, who's watching right now. Actually, and I'm curious if you heard this, Justin. He is saying that Duke did not put in a bid. Have you heard that?
I don't know whether that's the case or not. I don't know. There were roughly 35, 36 teams that bid. I would be a little surprised if Duke didn't bid, but I mean, I've been surprised before, and I have no way of knowing at this point. I do not know whether they did or not. If they didn't, well, then it makes sense why they weren't in there. But that many teams bidding, I would be a little surprised.
Yeah, that's interesting to see how that goes. All right, let's kind of go into some of the other stories here before we go through every conference and kind of break down who we think is in the field, who's hosting and who's not. Alabama beat Florida. The broadcast was making this narrative that the winner of that game would be the number 1 overall national seed. I don't buy it. I think Alabama winning that game, they're the number 3 national seed. I think they're behind UCLA and Oklahoma. Yes, you won the SEC tournament, but you did it in your backyard. And I think sometimes we overcomplicate this stuff. UCLA and Oklahoma have been the 2 best teams all year, consistent. That should be rewarded. I think Alabama is the 3. I think Florida is the 4. Your thoughts?
That's how I would see them. I will say my one caveat that I don't necessarily agree with, but that I could see happening, is Alabama as SEC champions being bumped over Oklahoma. I don't see it happening just because Oklahoma has been so good this year, but I could see that happening. For me, though, when I look at it, I see UCLA and Oklahoma 1-2, Alabama 3, and I think those 3 should be locked in. And Florida made it to the SEC championship game in spite of all of their potential problems. There have been some games where they've had to walk off against teams that should not have even been a close game. Coming into the season, you wondered about the pitching. There's been a lot of things, games that maybe they shouldn't have lost, a couple along through there, or surprising losses, so to speak. But somehow Florida's going to Florida. They're going to pull it out. And I see them easy as a 4. Based on the body of work, I don't see anybody taking that 4 from them. And that's a top 4 that's incredibly formidable. I mean, that's a top 4 that I feel like has set themselves apart independent of anybody else.
I agree. That should be the top 4. We can nitpick who's 1, 2, 3, 4, but at the end of the day, I think that's clear the top 4 there. We got a question from Troy. Thanks for tuning in, Troy. Interesting question. This is something that's also been brought up. He says, I think Duke will get a top 16 seed, but the number 2 team in the regional will be Georgia or Michigan and will be the host. Okay, that's an interesting thing. That was kind of brought up early in this process about a month ago about possibly a host being a 2 seed. Now, we had Matt Larson on in the circle back in early April, and I asked him about that possibility, and he kind of was taken aback by that. He kind of anticipated, he said a couple things, and I'm paraphrasing, but you can listen to the episode on our archives, on our podcast, wherever you listen to it. He says, we want to be as close to normal as possible in this process. And number 2, he did not seem like somebody like, yeah, I guess in theory that could happen, but we don't really think we're going to have a 2-seed host in that process. It's also worth mentioning, and I could be wrong on this, Justin, you're the mileage expert, as you've helped me out figure out this bus thing. Keep in mind, one of the criteria that the committee has is they have a bus thing where if a team is within 400 miles, they can bus. If they're over 400 miles, they cannot bus. I believe Duke, I don't know. Can they bus to Ann Arbor in that scenario? I don't know if they can. I have to quickly. I'm trying to remember. It would be a cool storyline because you have Marissa Young, the former Michigan Wolverine great, going back to Ann Arbor. That's going to be that's not a bad idea. I would not be against that. That's not what I have projected because I'm not a fan of 2 seeds hosting. But I will say that's a pretty creative there. That's not a bad little deal. By the way, I've just confirmed. And they are actually 669 miles. So that would be a flight. That would be a flight from that standpoint for Michigan. So I don't think they would do that. Because if you're going to have Michigan host, they could easily find, all right, a 2 seed and a 3 seed and a 4 seed that can bust to Ann Arbor. A lot of times the committee is going to pick a regional like that they know they can plug in 3 buses because they know out west they got to fly teams over, if that makes sense. So I don't see that as an option from that standpoint as far as the Duke-Michigan standpoint. As far as the Duke versus Georgia one, I think that's a more interesting one. That is actually can work. That's only 357 miles. That could work. The problem with that is I feel that if that happened, everybody will flip out if Georgia's hosting, considering how they finished the season, even if they are a 2 seed.
Well, I think Duke is the one option to be a number 1 seed that's not hosting. I don't think there's anybody else in that picture. And I think your mileage point, I think, is more imperative from Michigan because of who Michigan could bring in if they were to host as the 1. But I could see Duke going to a Georgia or even to a Virginia Tech. Let's not forget, yes, they're the same conference. Would that probably peeve some people at Virginia Tech? Absolutely, and understandably so. But I could also see something like that where Duke can host as the 1 seed. Do I think it's likely? Maybe. I mean, it really depends on how impressed the committee was with Duke's run this weekend and how much they want to reward them with that 1 seed. Because the biggest advantage for your 1 seed is you get to start off on a lighter foot in your regional. You get a little bit of a leg up in your regional by playing a team that automatically qualified for the tournament, which may mean a team in the 200s in RPI for some. Duke's the one I could see doing that. You mentioned Georgia is a reasonable distance. Virginia Tech's right there, and I don't know if they'd do it to a conference mate. I
would be shocked. I would be stunned.
But if you're going to do it, it's unprecedented. So
no.
To what level of unprecedented are you going to go?
I like Troy's idea about it. Let's get into Michigan. Let's just get into it since that's obviously a topic here. The Michigan Wolverines are the Big Ten champions. Again, the big storyline, the Big Ten this year decided to play conference only. They made that decision in December. They never wavered, even though, that you could have argued they could have done a limited non-conference scheduling with the Missouri Valley, the MAC, without even flying, but they chose not to do that. Michigan's RPI, depending on, when you check it out, it's in the high 20s, 30s. I've written this in the past. No team since 2008 that has hosted as a 1 seed has not had an RPI lower than 19. 19. You look back at Georgia, I believe 5 years ago, and Notre Dame in 2015. They both were 19 in the RPI when they hosted. So in other words, if you go based on track record, you got to be in the top 19 in the RPI to host. Michigan is not going to be there. But this is a unique year. Obviously, with COVID, the RPI is a little wacky. Do they give Michigan the benefit of the doubt? Do they give Michigan a 1 seed? Or, and Troy brings up the point, does Michigan host as a 2 seed, perhaps put a Duke team if they believe that Duke's a 1 seed? I don't think that's the craziest idea I've ever heard. I personally think it's between Kentucky and Michigan for the final host spot. They're both very interchangeable. I would throw Kentucky in the mix for that. Duke has to fly to Lexington as well. They cannot bust there either based on the mileage. But if I agree with you, Justin, if there's going to be a 1 seed that does not host and has to go to a 2 seed, Duke would make the most sense. And I would think that Michigan would make the most sense that they would host as a 2 seed, because you could argue based on their RPI, they would be more of a 2 line. If they go based on RPI, which we don't know what the committee's going to do this year with the RPI. Matt Larson said when he was on with us that isn't important too, but they also understood this was unique. That's a fascinating idea by you, Troy. Props to you on that. I think that is something to monitor. Very interesting idea. That could help Michigan host. I don't think Michigan will host as a 1 seed personally.
Well, the biggest benefit to Michigan being there right now is their location. It's not because of the record they have. It's not because of who they've played. It's not because they belong in the top 16. The biggest benefit to Michigan right now is their location. So if there was ever going to be a 2 seed, for instance, a team that got a 2 seed in the regional yet hosted it, that's the kind of one that I would expect would be the Michigan type, because their location is convenient. I'm still not convinced that's going to happen, but if it does, I think it's Duke. And if Duke is the 1 seed at the site of a 2 seed, Michigan has a lot going in its favor to be the answer to that question too, because of their location and because you do have a number of automatic qualifiers in that geographical region that can make the committee's life a lot easier.
Very interesting. I think the 1 seed is between a Kentucky and a Duke and a Michigan. And again, if they go based on RPI, Michigan will not be a 1 seed in that regard. Plus, you don't know, are they going to reward a team that did not play a non-conference game? That's going to be a hot topic there. Victor, I see Vic there. Have you figured out your technical issues, sir?
I believe I have, gentlemen. Can y'all hear me loud and clearly?
Much better. Much better. Your thoughts on the conversation?
Ah!
Okay, so I guess he doesn't hear us. So I guess the answer is no. He has not figured out. Oh,
well, I'm on a bit of a delay, so give me just a second. Let me rectify it.
Okay.
I feel like we should start Jeopardy music here.
Live programming here, ladies and gentlemen. But there we go. We'll see how that goes there. By the way, for the record, while Vic figures this out, I have at the moment Kentucky as the 16th and final host spot as a 1 seed. Their RPI is in the 16. They have it. I think you could argue they have a pretty darn good resume in that regard. But I think the Duke idea is fascinating. I haven't thought about that. That's a pretty good one. Duke is inside the top 16. Duke obviously has – the only thing that I think I would caution about Duke, they had coming in 8 wins against the top 50, 5 against the top 50. Kentucky has 8 wins against the top 25, 14 against the top 50. I would just caution there, but I don't think it's a crazy idea. I think that's in play, and I'll be all right with that in there. I'm getting asked question with Steve, will Michigan be able to allow fan attendance? Yes. I believe the Big Ten even announced that recently, that they can allow to have fans at their spring sporting events about a few weeks ago. So I believe they should be good as far as having people in the stands. Am I right on that, Justin?
I remember an announcement from the Big Ten. I don't know what that looks like for Michigan or in the teams independently, but it's one thing that I find interesting that's not really a factor in determining the host sites. Going into it with that announcement of who the 20 sites were going to be, that was a question that I got a lot was, is it going to matter whether or not they'll allow fans? Because at that point in time, and this was, a month or so ago, a lot of states did not have regulations that allowed fans at any level, much less a certain number kind of thing. So I'm not sure how that affects each school independently, but the Big Ten did relax those regulations. And unfortunately, I know more about softball than I do about individual states' mandates at this point. So my expertise, the line of my so-called expertise is drawn before that.
That's pretty good. That's a good line. That's a good line. Vic, have you figured out your delay? I take it as no. In fact, we don't hear you, Vic. You're like the Sunshine State Conference this year in 2021, just having issues all over the place. Can't start on time, only conference only, can't have the top 2 teams play. Easy there. I can hear you a little bit there. We are live. All right, so Vic's still working on his technical issues there. All right, let's get into more Big Ten talk here since that's – look, that's going to be the hot topic. We've discussed the Michigan hosting situation. How many teams will the Big Ten get from the committee? I think Michigan's a lock. I think Minnesota is pretty close to a lock, right? I think two's good. Northwestern's a wild card. Their RPI's in the 60s. One win, really a marquee win, which is the Michigan win. They lost 3 out of 4 there. But they have separated themselves as the number 3 team in the Big Ten. So if they want to go 3, they could go with Northwestern. Interesting developments today. The Big Ten season ends Sunday. Don't know why they're doing this. Well, they like to do that. They do this in basketball as well. The last game is Iowa-Illinois. I bring this up. Iowa has taken 2 of the first 3 from Illinois. If the Indiana got swept in a doubleheader today by Mark Montgomery and Maryland. So what that all means is if Iowa wins tomorrow against Illinois, they win the series 3 out of 4, and they lock up the 4 seed or the 4th spot. I'm thinking tournament terms here. They finish 4th, which would be the highest finish for Iowa in the Big Ten since 2009. And I will brag here. I said in the preseason they would finish 4th. Thank you. Of course, I had them in the tournament, so whoops. The question is, though, Justin, how many teams does the Big Ten get? Because this is going to be the hot topic. There's no question. This will be the biggest storyline on Sunday night that people will be talking about is how the committee looks at the Big Ten. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I have a feeling there's 10 people in Indianapolis who were probably yelling and gnashing of teeth about that exact topic. For me, the cap to the Big Ten is 3 teams. Michigan is in. Minnesota's in. Northwestern would be team number 3 for me. And I think that's it. I don't see any other team getting in part because the RPI is really wacky this year. I think everybody accepts that. No matter how much it's relied on as a metric for the committee, everybody accepts that the RPI is wacky this year. So if the RPI is wacky, you have to go off of other metrics. Well, because of the conference only, you can't go off of who have you beaten, who have you lost to, whatever. What you can do is look at a body of work and say, okay, how impressed are we with it on whatever scale that means? Well, Northwestern's body of work is a little questionable because they've had some losses that they shouldn't have had. It's not that they've run the table in the conference. Michigan hasn't even run the table in the conference. But Northwestern definitely hasn't. And the prohibition on playing anybody else has really hurt them in that. So I think the Big Ten is capped at 3. At this point, I do think they will get 3 in. However, if some of these conferences had gotten some bids stolen, I think Northwestern would have been the first ones out. So I think Northwestern and all the, the Wildcat faithful should probably be, thanking the Liberties and the Villanovas of the world for winning their conferences, because Northwestern was and truthfully, until we hear their name on Sunday night, probably still is that close to the chopping block. Yeah,
I think they're going to be one of the last 4 in. And it's going to be interesting about the Big Ten. I think I have Northwestern in as one of the last teams in. I'm not crazy about it, but it's a weak bubble this year. And I just think at the end of the day, the committee is going to give them Northwestern the benefit of the doubt because of their recent success. If you're a Big Ten fan, you need Iowa to win on Sunday to be the clear-cut number 4. And then hope that the committee goes with 4 teams from the Big Ten. Iowa is a team that could bust, for example, to Columbia, Missouri. Missouri, we believe, will host. We have them pretty high. So you could have a scenario where Iowa is competing against a team like Northern Iowa out of the Missouri Valley, who finished runner-up and is one of the hot teams. Does the committee go with a brand like Iowa from the Big Ten over a team like Northern Iowa? Do they go with a team like Iowa over a team like South Florida in the American, or a Troy, or other teams that you think about? I don't know. I don't think they will. I think Iowa Iowa has a win at Minnesota. They have a win against Northwestern, but the thing that's going to hurt them is they lost 3 out of 4 at Wisconsin. Their RPI is in the 100 range going in. Maybe they could break 100 if they win the series against Illinois. And I just don't know if the committee, while this RPI is a little distorted, I don't know if they're willing to go that high of a number. But if you're in the Big Ten, you want 4 clear-cut teams where you could identify who are the 4 teams. If you have a tie for 4th, I think that is a wipeout. I think that's it. That's your only chance. I do think Iowa, if they win against Illinois on Sunday, I believe it's a 4:00 game, which I think is dumb that you're playing that late. You're like, what do you expect the committee to wait 3 hours? Maybe. Our good friend Jenny Ritter, I think, will be on the call with that with Lisa Byington. I know they were on Friday night. But if they win that, they could be in the conversation at least. And again, they could bust to Columbia, or you could travel somewhere else. That's what you're hoping for if you're an Iowa fan, for example, or the Big Ten. I think Iowa is their best chance for a fourth team in the Big Ten. That's as many as I could see.
Yeah, and even then, I mean, you're on a wing and a prayer to get 4 in if you're the Big Ten.
Correct.
If the Big Ten gets 4 teams in, the entire conference should just fall to their knees in thankfulness, because that's about what it took to get them there if they get there.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So that's the storyline from the Big Ten perspective. Let's go through other conferences. Let's go to the ACC. We've talked a lot about Duke. Clemson, we haven't talked about them. They won the regular season title. They finished runner-up. We're confident they're hosting, right? Despite the fact that their non-conference schedule was not the strongest. In fact, it's ranked 111th as of Saturday, non-conference schedule strength, 96 overall. But I believe they're in the top 19 in RPI, and that's that magic number I brought up, 19. I personally think Clemson should host. I think they will host. They have a very favorable geography in their favor. 3 teams can bust there easily. And quite frankly, to me, they're one of the great stories in college softball with John Rittman, who I think should be the National Coach of the Year. And I think while they won't say it, I think when you've had a year, you lost a year, in my opinion, college softball needs some good storylines in the postseason. Their numbers in the regular season were down for a lot of various reasons. First of all, there was a lot of sports going on, among other. But I think to have some intriguing storylines, to grab some casual fans back, I think Clemson's earned it. They've won the regular season title in the ACC, which is the number 4 strongest conference. I understand the uniqueness of the unbalanced schedule, but I think they should be a host. And they beat Virginia Tech in the semis. They lost to Duke. I would feel better if they would have beaten Duke, but I think they sneak in as a host.
Yeah, I think they're a host. And the thing is, Clemson won the ACC regular season. They did not play Notre Dame or Florida State to do it, and they did not play well against Duke or Virginia Tech when they played them. A couple of losses to each. Now, that's where the lack of a strength of schedule comes in, because you didn't play Florida State. You didn't play Notre Dame. That's 2 of the top 5. Clemson's 1, Duke and Virginia Tech are the others. So the record is a little deceptive. It is. That aside, though, they lost 4 games in the regular season. They lost 4 games. What are you going to do about that? They were 37-4 at one point. 37-4. I mean, nobody equals that. Like you say, they're very geographically friendly to a lot of teams. They have a great story. First year program, first full year, whatever. But they've got nice facilities. They've got a gorgeous stadium that is allowing some level of fans, that has a good TV setup, which is important. We're in the postseason. That's important. The only thing going against Clemson is a subjective, well, are they really that good? Well, so far, ACC regular season championship and played in the tournament championship. I think Clemson's an easy host.
Some people have asked me and brought up the fact, are they like Minnesota in 2017 when Minnesota won the Big Ten regular season and tournament title but did not get a national seed because of their weak non-conference schedule, as the committee said? The difference there is Minnesota's not geography friendly. You can't bust teams to Minnesota, not 3 of them anyway, like you can with Clemson, in my opinion. So I think, again, geography plays a role in this. I'm not a fan of it, but that's the rules. Until it changes, I'm going with it. And I think Clemson can bust 3 teams. And I think the ACC has earned having 2 host sites. It's a strong league. And I think Clemson and Florida State, as we'll get into in a moment, are the 2 teams that should host out of the ACC. I have no issues with it. But, I mean, I hope that they do the right thing there. And I think they can bust a bunch of teams in there. And I think that will help. That's always geography friendly. So I agree with you. I have Clemson hosting. I also have Florida State hosting. I don't think that's a question. The question is, where is Florida State going to be seated? Losing in the semis to Duke in the semis. First time in like 6 years they haven't been to an ACC championship game. They did not win the regular season. RPI is in the top 8. Are they in danger of not being a top 8 team? They could be a bubble team top 8. I have them as a top 8 seed, but I don't think it's a lock. Do you?
I don't think it's a lock. They've been a little underwhelming by Florida State historical standards. They've been a little underwhelming. At the same time, though, it is Florida State. They do have a little bit of that brand. And as much as I know no fans are going to hate me saying this, they've got a little bit of the Florida in them. What I was talking about with Florida earlier, with that ability to do what they do and to come out ahead even when it looks like they shouldn't, Florida State's got some of that too. And they did well. Yes, they lost in the semis, but their record during the season was pretty solid. They split against Auburn, for instance, early on in the season in a weekend tournament kind of thing. But, they played some teams that were worth something in the non-conference, played well in the conference, lost in the semis, yes, but it's still Florida State. Their overall record's impressive. Their RPI is solid. I think they're a lock to host. I don't think they're a lock. I think they're a lock to be a high host, a high-ranked host. I don't think they're necessarily a lock into that top 8, though.
Yeah, I think that's going to be interesting to see where they land on that. If they could be I think they could be anywhere between a 7 to a 9 in the seeding line there. I think that's what we're looking at with them. They do have the 12th, a strong non-conference schedule. They rank 12th, I believe, in that. So I would not just be dismissive of that. I think that's something that we know they like to look at. And I still think they're going to sneak into the top 8, but you never know. And we'll see what happens with that. But I think that's a note to follow. Other ACC teams we expect to be in the tournament, Notre Dame, I think they'll be a 2 seed, probably will travel somewhere. All right. I think they're going to travel there as well. Then Virginia Tech, I think will also obviously be in the field. I thought they had a shot to maybe if they got to the ACC final to host, but they lost in the semis. I don't believe they will host this season. So I think they're out when it comes to that particular aspect of it. And then obviously we've talked about Duke as well. So we think 5 teams, pretty clear cut. I don't think anybody else in the ACC has a chance to make the tournament. So
No.
Let's get into the SEC. We all do like that, of course. 13 teams. First of all, let's start with that. Does the SEC get everybody in? The only question mark is South Carolina. They have a 500 overall record. Their RPI, I believe, was at 44 entering Saturday. I've given this stat before, and I think you've seen it on Justin's World site as well. Out of the last 160 teams out of the SEC that have had a winning record, 153 of them have made the NCAA tournament. Only 7 have not. And of those 7 teams, only 2 of them that had an RPI of 50 or better missed the NCAA tournament. And you got to go back a decade for that to find that. In other words, in the last decade, if you're an SEC team, a 500 or better, and you have an RPI of 50 or better, you're in the field. And that all applies to South Carolina. If the numbers correctly, from what I've seen, they're probably going to be in the top 50, which is right on the number. I do think this is a razor thin SEC team. This is razor thin, but I do think South Carolina sneaks in.
Yeah, and I think this one's closer than, for instance, Texas A&M a few years ago.
Yeah.
I think this one's right around the same level that the Missouri team that bought themselves into the tournament was a few years ago under the interim head coach. I think that's where we are with South Carolina. Not a completely convincing regular season. A few wins here and there. They had a little run to survive when they needed to in the tournament. If they'd lost, it would have put them under 500. Instead, you win and you lose, and that puts you at 500. I mean, they did what they had to do to get to – yes, this year under 500 is eligible. I don't see the committee putting an under 500 team in the field. So you got where you needed to be in consideration for my money. But it's the SEC. All those losses, that bad conference record came against the big dogs of the world. A lot of these teams that are going to be hosting regionals, some teams that are going to be hosting super regionals. So, as always, there's that caveat that your low team in the SEC gets. And by virtue of that and a 500 record, thanks to their tournament showing, I think South Carolina's probably in the field. Now, do I think they're, I think they're a mid-level 3 seed. I don't think they're going to get any special favors other than being in, but I think they're in.
If you can take one team out, Northwestern or South Carolina, who would you take out?
If I could take one out?
Yeah.
Oh, well, Northwestern's out. Because I penalize the Big Ten. Granted, I'm not penalizing the coaches and players for a decision they made, but you're in the Big Ten. The Big Ten screwed over their teams, their coaches, their players, and the body of work is not there for me. So if it's down to one of those two, well, then the Big Ten team is going to lose out, and I think that's fair given the balance. I don't think it's fair to them. I don't think what the Big Ten did to their conference teams is fair to them, but only so much you can do at this point. It's what happened.
South Carolina has a win at Florida. They won 2 out of 3 against South Carolina. They have a couple wins against Auburn. Yes, we hear you, Vic. You're coming on with the chat there. So I think South Carolina sneaks into because of that. But it'll be close. It'll be close. It'll be very close from that standpoint, from that deal. So, all right, let's get into the seeding for the SEC. So we both have Alabama, Florida in the top 4. We have Arkansas top 8, right? We agree with that. I think Arkansas will be a top 8 seed, winning the SEC regular season title. Other teams that we think will, and we think those 4, by the way, Florida, Alabama, Arkansas. We'll just say those 3. We think they're locks to host. All right.
In the top 8.
Top 8. In the top 8. We think LSU will host. We think Missouri will host. We think Tennessee will host. I think those 6 are locks to host. Agree?
Yeah, I think so. Within the top 16, I think those 6 have. And the thing is, coming into the last few weeks of the season, some of those were not locks. I think some of them locked it up in the last few weeks of the season. I think some of them, cough, Tennessee, maybe were more of a lock. Then you go in, you lose to Mississippi State, and you kind of loosen up. But then you make a tournament run, maybe get back to where you were. But between those 6, I think all 6 will host regionals.
I agree. I think the one bubble team in the hosting is Kentucky, as we've obviously discussed. The question is,
Georgia,
where does it?
I think we both believe is not going to host a regional.
They just ended badly. I just think people would be livid if they hosted, even if it's a 2 seed. I just think
somebody's got to be left out,
right? Especially since you're going to be a heavy SEC Southern type tournament. That's the other factor too. The question's going to be, where do these teams get seeded? And I think the interesting thing is, we've discussed, we think if you look at the top 8 seeds in some particular order, you'll have UCLA, Oklahoma, Alabama, Florida, Arkansas, Florida State, and we believe Oklahoma State. There's that one spot, the 8th spot, that we kind of think is open. We kind of thought it might be a Washington, but Washington just split with Stanford. They've kind of scuffled. That 8th seed is wide open. Who's your pick for the 8th seed right now if the committee called you, Justin, and you would pick?
LSU. I know there's some people who are going to snort in derision when I say that, but the strength of LSU's schedule, nobody else has played a schedule like that. Because you say, okay, well, the SEC always plays a tough schedule. That's true. That's absolutely true. In conference play this year, LSU played Arkansas. They played Florida. They played Tennessee. They played Missouri. They played Kentucky. Let's stop at those 5. Okay. They played a couple others, but those are the 5 that are important. So you played the five of the teams that we're talking about being either in the bubble or a lock to host regionals. The only SEC team that LSU did not play in conference play that is in the mix legitimately to host a regional is Alabama. Oh, they missed them this year. Oh, no. They played them in a non-conference matchup, and they played them twice. Scheduled them intentionally. So add Bama to that list in non-conference. They also played Liberty, no slouch. Played a 3-game series against Texas, no slouch. The strength of their schedule as a whole, and again, of their conference slate, they played in conference play 5 of the 6 teams that we're talking about being in the mix to host regionals. It's an insanely difficult schedule. They win about 500 against that schedule. That means they've got 15 wins. 15 wins with that kind of strength of schedule. It's ridiculously strong. And sure, they've skidded some. But when I look at the full picture, I can't penalize LSU for the losses as much when if my alternative is rewarding another team for beating, forgive me for saying it, the South Dakota States of the world. I just can't make a connection. And that's no offense to South Dakota State, but South Dakota State's not Texas.
What's fascinating, you look at the numbers, you just read off some of those with LSU. It is historic. Since 2012, with a team with that type of a schedule strength, usually is finished in the top 8 seeds. Think back to 2 years ago. Florida, I know they won the SEC tournament, but Florida jumped all the way to being a 5 seed, jumped Alabama. Why? Because of a stronger non-conference schedule. The committee looks at non-conference schedule. That's a big part of it. LSU just had played 31 games against the top 25. I think they're going to get rewarded for playing a tough schedule, because if they're not rewarded with a top 8 RPI, the message you're saying is you can play the toughest schedule you want, but it doesn't matter. And I don't think that's a message to the committee. The committee usually does not send that message out.
Well, here's the thing. In non-conference play, the toughest opponents that LSU played, for instance, were Alabama, were Texas, etc. You didn't see LSU playing, going to all these different tournaments and stuff and playing a bunch of teams in the 200s. However, another team up for that bid would be the Washington Huskies for that 8th spot. And Washington this season in non-conference play, I have the paper sitting here, right? So I didn't say this. I have to say this from memory. Washington played 6 teams this year who were over 200 in RPI at the present day. 6 teams over 200. That's absolutely abysmal. I could go on for a while about Washington, but the point being, you have LSU who's played 31 games against all these great teams, including conference, and Washington's played great in conference, but also played a ton of cupcakes. And honestly, they have 2 losses to teams right around 100 in RPI. Losses. You can't do that.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. Now, the counter to that is Washington, the second best team in the Pac-12. I don't remember a second-place team from the Pac-12 not being a top 8 seed. That would be unique. So do they go on history? Do they go on numbers? That's why we're going to find out Sunday night there. I do think Missouri has a shot, had an outside shot had they gotten to the final of the SEC, maybe won it. I think they're kind of in the mix. So would Tennessee. If Tennessee would have gotten to the final and hosted, perhaps they could have gotten in as well. But
to the top 8.
To the top 8, correct. Thank you for correcting me on that. So I think those are the SEC teams that play. Kentucky, I have hosting. Do I feel great about it? No. But they could bust 3 teams in there. I think it's them and Michigan, to be honest, to host the 16th and final spot. Could we see a scenario that Troy brought up earlier in the show where Duke is a 1 seed and going to Kentucky or going to a Michigan? I could see that. I don't think that's crazy, but I think I would be surprised if Kentucky or Michigan, or if both of them are not hosting. I would be a little surprised because those 2 are so good geography friendly, so good. And I just think they can make things work. And Kentucky, RPI is inside the top 16, at least at last as of Saturday. So, but we'll see. That's tight. That's going to be really tight. I could see the arguments on both sides, on all sides on that one. So, I think that's the picture for the SEC here going into Selection Sunday night. Now, a huge development took place on Saturday in the Big 12. Oklahoma beat Oklahoma State to win the Big 12 title. But that's not the big story. Big. Oh. Yeah. That's not one. That's not the one. Texas Tech knocked off Texas on Saturday. It's upsetting Texas. Texas goes 1-2 in the Big 12 tournament. Not a strong finish for Mike White and the Longhorns, as they end up going, I believe, 4-6 in their last 10 games. I think they ended up losing something to the extent of 8 of their last 12 games to finish the season. They may have lost an opportunity to host here by the way they finished. In fact, not to give it away, but, well, we'll give it some away. We don't have Texas hosting as of Sunday. When the Sunday final projections come out, we don't have them hosting because of how they finished. They could still host, but I think Texas could be in trouble as far as hosting.
Well, and, earlier to that point, we were talking about where the most likely spot was for a 1 seed to not host, but to be the 1 seed. Texas could be it. I mean, I'm just going to throw that out there. But they've done it to themselves. It's a self-inflicted wound. If you look at the Big 12 this year, across the board, I mean, Texas Tech was the bottom of the conference. They were. The last couple of years, we've gotten used to seeing Texas Tech up towards the top. But, they were at the bottom of the conference this year for, they just were. Well, you come in, and they didn't just beat Texas today. They dominated Texas today. They dominated Texas today more than Oklahoma State dominated Texas yesterday. Cough, cough, they didn't. They won on a walk-off strikeout. Texas is going to suffer for the way they've ended here. They've played themselves out of a top 8 seed, out of any consideration for a top 8 seed. They've done that to themselves. And now you're getting to the point where you're either playing yourself into a really high seed and bring in a really tough number 2, or you're playing yourself into a not hosting, because the committee's going to pay attention to that. I guarantee you in that committee room today, there was somebody who said, oh, wow, Texas Tech just beat Texas. And I guarantee you that changed some thought processes. Good, bad, or ugly, it changed some thought processes. And, I mean, I have serious questions about what that means for Texas. I think at the very least you're talking about a mid-level teens seed at best for Texas now.
I think we're going to look. I think when the selections begin, if you're a Texas fan, you're going to know early if you're hosting or not. When Oklahoma's bracket comes out, do you see Texas State and or Texas A&M? If you see Texas State or Texas A&M in Oklahoma, Texas ain't hosting. Simple as that. If you don't see Texas State or Texas A&M host in Oklahoma or Oklahoma State, then Texas will host. Texas, the things they have going for them is a good RPI, obviously, 14 wins against the top 50, 37 strong overall schedule strength. However, compare that to a team like Oregon. Oregon, 11th strongest schedule overall. 6 wins against the top 25. Now they're 10-14 against under 500 against the top 50. What is the committee looking for? Are they looking for top 50 wins, top 25 wins, schedule strength? Oregon has 2 wins over UCLA, which tops any win that Texas has. Texas's best win is what? LSU probably, if you topped it up there. But I think it's a flip of a coin. Something to keep in mind. Portland State won the Big Sky, correct? They're in the Big Sky? All right. Vic has jumped in with no noise there. So did that was an interesting timing. Did Portland State won in the Big Sky, correct?
Yeah. Sure.
Portland State can bust to Oregon, and they can bust to Washington. So can Seattle. So the point is, they've got a team now that can bust to Oregon. You could fly a Texas team, for example, to Oregon, and boy, wouldn't that be a nice, fun little storyline now, wouldn't it? What storylines could play out of that one? I don't know.
Nothing.
Just checking.
Nothing. It's just random teams.
Yeah. So I think it's between Oregon and Texas. I think that's the debate. I think there are 2 host spots in question, maybe 3 if you include Clemson. I think it's Kentucky versus Michigan for one host spot, and I think it's Oregon and Texas for the other. I think from a geography standpoint, it makes sense. And again, it's going to come down to, does the committee put Texas State and or Texas A&M at Oklahoma or Oklahoma State? If those teams are in the Oklahoma regional or Oklahoma State, Texas is not hosting. But if A&M and Texas State do not pop up in the Oklahoma regionals, that tells you that Texas will host. That's the key to watch if you're a Longhorn fan on Sunday night.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a good tidbit, because sometimes you gotta go with the little.
Well, this is the thing people forget. These conferences, like the Big Sky, the Conference USAs, the Big West, they all have an impact on who's hosting because of the travel. If you get teams that can bust, that helps a team's hosting ability, like a Portland State going to Oregon potentially, or Seattle going to Washington. Those things help. Had New Mexico State won the WAC, Arizona could have bust to Arizona. Things like that are significant, especially in the West Coast, which is very difficult to find bus trips for teams in the West Coast.
Well, consider too that this year you don't have as many teams from the state of Texas who are automatic qualifiers.
North Texas was upset. That was huge. Big.
Texas Southern did not win the SWAC. Texas State and Texas A&M are both sitting there, but you mentioned they could go to Norman. That you could rearrange them a little bit. So while the teams that can play in a regional don't necessarily determine the host, they do play a factor. And the pull is not there as much for Texas. That doesn't mean that Texas is going to not host because of that. But it's a factor that doesn't help them. It doesn't hurt them, but it doesn't help them. Which sometimes you need factors that help you when you've hurt yourself.
So we'll see. I'm not saying they won't host. They could host. I had them hosting as of today. I won't as of Sunday. But that doesn't mean they can't. I think it's a flip of a coin. It depends what the committee wants to do. Steven's saying this year's trophy should have a bus on it. Look, they like to bus teams on a normal year, and this is not a normal year. There's been COVID. There's the protocols. I think they're going to be aggressive and try to find buses. I'm sorry. They always do that with Olympic sports. I don't like it, but that's the way it is. And again, there is a path for an Oregon to host and for Texas not to. And again, I do like if you look at the seedings, Texas and Oregon makes a lot of sense if they want to go that storyline, either Mike White hosting Oregon or Mike White going to Oregon. That's TV gold. And there's always a regional or two, especially in the West Coast, that has a lot of TV appeal.
Yeah. And those things aren't what determines the host, but they play a factor. And that's a factor sometimes you can't ignore. And by the way, I should clarify, I see a comment here. No, I didn't say Oklahoma State dominated Texas. I may have muttered when I said it. I said Texas Tech dominated Texas way more than Oklahoma State did, and then Oklahoma State did not dominate Texas. They won on a walk-off third strike. That's a walk-off strikeout. So that was my point. Oklahoma State did not dominate Texas yesterday, and I see a comment. So I wanted to clarify in case
you're getting the voice of Texas, Andrew, upset here. Come on, man.
I didn't have that. So that's why I want to make sure, muttering aside, that I clarified. Oklahoma State did not dominate Texas. However, Texas Tech did. And that's more damning, personally, I think.
It wasn't helpful. All right, Vic, do you want to test out to see if you've figured out the technical issues here? Do you want to test it out or no? Silence. It's always good. That's definitely a no. Okay, we'll take that as a no.
All right, you don't need to stop all this silence, y'all. Now,
there we go. We heard something there.
God dang it! I don't know if it was good or bad, but you heard something.
All right, how about now? Do you hear? We hear you now. Do you hear us?
I can't get no breaks. I
take it as no. You're not hearing us.
I agree with you. I think that's a no at this point.
All right, so you can't hear us, Vic. I don't know what to tell you on that. One more thing about Texas that I do worry about. I do worry about this about Texas. 0-7 against Oklahoma State, Oklahoma. If they beat Oklahoma State on Friday, I don't think we're having this conversation. Or if they take a game or two from Oklahoma State, I don't think we're having this conversation. I worry about the 0-7 against the two Oklahoma schools. That worries me, especially when Oregon has 2 wins against UCLA. They have 2 wins against Arizona. I do worry about it. I am worried for Texas. I'm not saying they can't host. I think they could go either way. But I have concerns if I'm a Texas Longhorn fan tonight.
Yeah, I mean, that's the takeaway from Texas here. Statistics, RPI notwithstanding, at the very minimal least, Texas is in trouble right now. Texas is not going into Sunday comfortable. Texas is going into Sunday rather uncomfortable.
And if they host, they're probably going to be in the teens. They're going to be in the probably 13 to 16 range, which means you're probably going to get Florida, Alabama, UCLA, or Oklahoma in that pairing, that could be a problem. Yeah. So we'll see. That's going to be one of the most interesting questions. Other storylines in the Big 12. Oklahoma State Kenny Gajewski gets to the Big 12 final. We believe they're a lock for a top 8 seed. The question is, are they a 5 or a 6 seed? I think that's the question in Stillwater, I think, come Sunday night.
Yeah, I think it's down to Oklahoma State and Arkansas 5 and 6, which is interesting. Personally, I would prefer Oklahoma State and Arkansas be 8 and 9. I wish they had been a little worse this year because I got to see those teams play one another in the opening game of the season, and it was like 12-11. It was Eberle. It was half. It was great. So was really hoping for an Arkansas-Oklahoma State Super Regional. Instead, now we see them. I think you're right. I think it's those two, 5 and 6 in either order, just based on the full body of work.
Iowa State, great story with Jamie Pinkerton. What an incredible turnaround for the Cyclones. I think they're a lock to be in, and I think Baylor's in, despite them kind of having a tough Big 12 tournament. But I think they're in the Big 12, number 3 strongest conference in college softball. I think they're a 5-bid league. I think had Kansas finished better and finished above 500 with some of their wins they have against Wichita State, Missouri, and Oklahoma State, I think they could have snuck in this year as a 6th team in the Big 12, but they finished poorly. They did not even qualify for the Big 12 tournament. Texas Tech did. Texas Tech actually represented themselves very well under Sammy Ward there with the upset of Texas, gave Oklahoma a decent game there and beat Baylor. Good showing by them. But I think it's a 5-bid league for the Big 12 this year.
Yeah, I agree. And, even with the 500 record requirement not being there this year, I think we agree because we've talked about it and I've heard from others that the strong indication is the committee is going to be as close to normal as possible, including teams above 500. So I think that's where Kansas hurts themselves. And again, like you said, they didn't qualify for the tournament. They had a bad run at the end. And I think it's just, Kansas will be good in a couple of years, I think, if they can keep some talent around and not just, stock the transfer portal. But this year, I think 5 is good. And that's a good year for the Big 12. So it's a solid 5.
I think Kansas is headed in the right direction, so I think the future is bright for the league. But we think Oklahoma State locks to host, Texas in the bubble to host. But we think Iowa State's hosting is going to be in the field, I should say. Perhaps at Missouri, or they travel. Baylor likely to travel somewhere. We don't know where. I think Baylor, if there's a team that maybe has to sweat a little bit, is Baylor. They didn't finish strong, but I still think they're good enough to get in the field. Pac-12, UCLA. Will they be the 1 seed or the 2 seed? I don't see it going any lower than that. I personally think they're the number 1 overall seed. They're the defending national champions. They win the Pac-12 again. I think Washington's in. Will they be? Where are they going to be seeded is a question. Arizona and Arizona State. I think both of them host, but some questions about Arizona. Arizona kind of limped in, losing 3 out of 4 to UCLA. Granted, almost all of their losses were to teams that were ranked at the top 25 at the time, played a tough schedule. Is Arizona in the bubble as far as hosting, or do they host regardless? I think Arizona State's close to a lock. I think both host, but do they have to sweat it out?
I don't think they have to sweat it out. I think that for Arizona, I think there's some people around Arizona who still think they have a chance at a top 8 seed, and I don't see that. But in terms of being in the top 16 and hosting at Hillenbrand, I think it's an easy yes. I think they're early teens or early double digits, I should say. Arizona State probably right behind them. Both of them have pretty solid bodies of work. I really wish we'd gotten to see that Texas, Arizona, Alabama opening weekend, because that could have solved all of our problems about both Arizona and Texas one way or the other. But I think for me personally, Arizona and Arizona State are both locks to host in the top 16. I don't see either one of them having much of a shot at the top 8 at this point. I know there's some people, I've been asked about it. I saw some stuff that they think Arizona has a chance at the top 8. I know
really
asked about that. And
wow,
I don't see it. I don't see it. And 2, I understand it's UCLA, but on your last weekend losing 3 out of 4, no matter what, you've got to realize there's a certain element of what have you done for me lately with the committee, and losing 3 out of 4 on your last weekend when you're looking to be a top 8 seed, which means you probably should at least challenge to split, even with the number 1 team. And you don't even really get there. So I don't think they have a chance at top 8, but I think Arizona State both easy locks, top 16, and play softball in Tempe and Tucson.
Oregon, we've talked about them. They're in. The question is, do they host? I think they're in the mix. It could go either way there. I do think they benefited from Portland State and Seattle winning those respective conference tournaments because it gives the committee an option if they believe that Oregon should host as a top 16 seed. They have that window possibility. We'll see if that's what they decide to do, or do they keep Oregon? If they keep Oregon out of hosting, it's because they're under 500 overall against the top 50. They are the only team among the host teams. Them and Georgia are under 500 overall against the top 50. That could be the difference there, but we'll see on Sunday night. And then Stanford, heck of a Jessica Allister, quietly, just nonchalant, going to Stanford, boom, 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 splitting with Oregon, splitting with Washington. I mean, quietly. Borderline 2 seed, 3 seed for Stanford. Heck of a second half here for Stanford that nobody talks about, and I think that's how Jessica likes it. I think they could be a dangerous team wherever they end up, but clearly a 6-bid league for the Pac-12.
Yeah, and again, in the category of what have you done for me lately? Oh, Stanford, let's go win 2 against Washington in the last weekend. It's the exact opposite of what I just said about Arizona. Stanford, if there was any doubt left, it is now gone. I don't think there was any left. I think Stanford was in. But if anybody had some, it's gone now. And for the Pac-12, with the way it could have gone, that's a pretty solid showing. I mean, you've got quite a number of teams in the conversation, legitimate conversation to host. You've got Stanford, that's a pretty solid in. And then, I mean, your bottom 3, you knew were going to be some struggles. But for your top 2/3, your top 6, it's a pretty impressive showing. It's a pretty solid showing. I think the Pac-12's capped at 4 hosting, personally. I say that. Oregon could get in. I wouldn't put them in, but I know you did, so.
Oh, I didn't know. This is breaking news. Who do you have as the host then over Oregon? You have Texas?
Well, that's where I go between Texas and Oregon. And it's not just because of Mike White, I promise. Although, I mean, I love a good storyline as much as anybody. But for me, I mean, that's where I kind of battle between Texas and Oregon because Oregon looks good. They're flashy. They were top 5 at one point this season. I'm just not impressed. I think at this point, if they host, you're not going to hear me complain about it. But if it was my job to see the top 16 and it was mine alone, I wouldn't have Oregon in there. If that makes sense. I feel like I'm trying to ride in the fence that I don't intend to. I don't have a problem with Oregon hosting, but if it was up to me and me alone, I wouldn't have them hosting because I'm just not I don't completely buy in.
Interesting. Victor, I see you. I don't know if we figured things out yet. We'll see. We're going to test this out. Whose side are you on? Are you on Justin's side with Texas over Oregon, or you got me with Oregon over Texas?
Honestly, if I had to choose, I'd rather take Oregon over Texas. And if by the looks of Eric's sound, you're success, you can hear me loud and clearly.
Yeah, heck yeah.
But here's the reason why, fellas. If you look at Oregon's resume, they got the win against UCLA. Granted, it was a non-conference game, whatever the heck that means, and a neutral site. The committee always values those non-conference wins and those wins on neutral sites. So by that virtue alone, I think Oregon's going to get the edge over Texas if it was coming down to those two. What also helps Oregon, and Eric, you pointed this out earlier, Portland State winning the Big Sky gives a team like Oregon the ability to bust someone like Portland State to them or to Washington. So as a result, you have Oregon in a more favorable position to host than Texas would, because especially the way they played down the stretch, you get swept at home at Arkansas, at Oklahoma against Oklahoma State. Then you go 1-2 in the Big 12 tournament, and I feel personally, can Texas contend in whatever region they're in? Absolutely, that's no question. But the way that they ended the season is a concern for me. I talked to Andrew Haynes, who's very vocally expressing his expression with Mr. McLeod.
Yeah, clearly.
Now.
Yeah.
But don't worry, just because you haven't heard me, I haven't been keeping tabs on the chats. So the fact that Texas did not end the season on a positive note, and the fact that Oregon did, and they had to win against UCLA, in my opinion, I think Oregon should get the favor over Texas, but I think both Texas and Oregon will and should be hosting.
Okay, well, all right. So now that we can hear you, Vic. Okay, you've heard our conversation. So you have both Oregon, Texas hosting. Who do you have not hosting?
If it was me, I would not have Kentucky hosting. Simply because if we're going to evaluate how teams ended their season, Kentucky bounced early in the SEC tournament. Yes, I understand they beat South Carolina to end the regular season, but that was against South Carolina with the bottom team in the SEC. You have to value, one, what teams do at the end of the season, and two, what are their marquee wins? And you can compare those three teams. Oregon has obviously that ace in their sleeve with UCLA. Obviously, you'll have Texas and Kentucky battling probably for that final hosting slot, because you have those teams that can. And again, with Texas and Kentucky, could you make the case for one over the other? Because there are so many teams that you can bus to Austin and to Lexington. That's going to be the biggest thing. If you select Oregon and you have to choose between Texas and Kentucky, where pretty much the resumes are pretty similar, you can go Texas. 10 minutes later, you can say Kentucky, and I wouldn't have a problem with either one.
I'm not against that idea, except I know the committee well, and we've talked about it. They like geography, and the thing about a Kentucky type or a Michigan type is you're guaranteed 3 teams there that can bus. No flights. That is not the case this year at Texas. That is not the case at Oregon. So I just feel like Kentucky. We've talked about this, Victor, over the years when we've done these selection shows. Kentucky is the committee's best friend because they're reliable and you can bust 3 teams in there and save you some cash. And that is a factor. I'm sorry. I'm not saying I like it. I'm just following what they're doing.
They're facts. It's just facts.
Right? Because I agree with you. I would actually have Oregon and Texas hosting over Kentucky, but geography ain't going to allow that. And Justin and I brought up, I think the thing that hurt Texas with the Texas Tech loss, you had North Texas stunningly upsetting Conference USA tournament. No North Texas, a couple other Texas teams bounced out. There's not as many Texas teams as normal. So, I got to tell you something. And I've been doing this since 2013. This is the least confident I have going into a Sunday night selection show when it comes to hosting, picking the host sites. I really believe that. I would be shocked if I nailed all 16. I would not be surprised if I only end up with 14. And I got to be honest with you, unless they go Georgia, I don't think I will have any issues with whatever the committee does in that regard.
So it sounds to me, Eric, that you are 100% confident that Georgia will not be hosting.
I'm saying they shouldn't. Now, we had a list. Someone that tuned in earlier made a good point. Could they host as a 2 seed with Duke as a 1? Duke can bust to Georgia. You could bust some teams at Georgia. I don't think that's crazy. I'm not a fan of that. I don't like 2 seeds hosting. Why should they host? Based on what?
That's valid.
But that's in play. I think it's more likely with Michigan if they were to host. If Michigan hosts, maybe they're the 2. I just would be stunned if the committee gave Michigan a 1 seed, but they are Michigan, so who knows? Again, to me, those 2, I just have no idea what direction the committee is going to go to. Nothing would surprise me in that direction. I think to me, the 2 teams that are out is Georgia and Virginia Tech. I think they're out of the equation at this time. Maybe I'll be proven wrong, but I am not the most confident this year when it comes to, because I think it is a very difficult year to figure out the seedings, not only from a hosting standpoint, but from a 1 seed, 2 seed, 3 seed, 4 seed line. This is a difficult year because of the wackiness of the RPI, among other things. I think is very tricky. Troy chimes in saying, I like Arizona State better than Arizona's resume. You can make that case. But the committee doesn't. That's not a big deal. I don't think it's going to come down to Arizona State or Arizona for 1 spot. I just think Arizona's going to get the benefit of the doubt because they're Arizona. That's how this works. I'm sorry. I would be stunned if Arizona didn't host. I would be stunned. But we'll see what happens with that come the Pac-12 there. So we've gone over the Pac-12. We've gone over the Big Ten, ACC, SEC. Who we left next in the league there? Big 12 we covered. Let's go to some of the other leagues. The Sun Belt. 4 teams could be in the field. That's what I have projected. Louisiana, the Sun Belt champions. You got Texas State. What a year for Ricky Woodard. And then South Alabama. Some people had him in the bubble. I was a defender of South Alabama. They proved me right in the Sun Belt tournament. Coming out of the losers bracket to make it all the way to the championship game. And then Troy. Is Troy the question mark? Is Troy the bubble team? I think if there's a team that would be sweating for the Sun Belt on Selection Sunday, it's Troy. Do you guys agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, I think, and again, it's a self-inflicted wound. Coming into the weekend, I think South Alabama was the ones who were going to have to sweat themselves out. Okay. I think they thought the same thing. Run to the championship game, you're not sweating so much on Sunday. But Troy getting out so early, it doesn't do them any favors. They're on the RPI bubble as it stands. So you're not in you have a 22 in front of your name. We're going to put you in no matter what. You're on that bubble. You're on that you're in that frame of, okay, you're probably pretty safe, ... Oh, but are you really? So if I'm Troy, I'm sweating going into Sunday. I think they should be in. I have no problem with the Sun Belt getting 4 teams in. But if I'm Troy, I realize that the committee might not look at a group of 5 conference getting 4 teams in as something they want to do. You never know what the thought processes are going to be. And right now, I think Troy is the closest Sun Belt team to the chopping block.
Yeah, I'd agree. They got to go to Gainesville. They could go to Gainesville. They could go to Tuscaloosa. Those are their options from a busing standpoint. We'll see. I think Troy gets in, but I do think they're one of the last 5 teams in. And I think they are the team from the Sun Belt that will probably be a little nervous come Selection Sunday. Vic, a league we both know well is the American. The American, UCF and Wichita State locks, right? Locks. They were the 2 best teams. They played for the championship. Wichita State won that. Congrats to Christy Breadbrenner. UCF should be in the tournament for the first time since 2016. I think for Wichita State, I think they're a strong 2 seed. I think the question is, do they go to Arkansas? Do they go to Oklahoma State? Do they go to Missouri? Yeah, I think those are or Oklahoma even. Oh boy. Those are the 4 sites that Wichita could end up with. I have them going to Arkansas because they didn't play. They were supposed to play the end of the regular season. They got scrapped. I'm intrigued by that matchup. I'd like to see the Mary Half and Arkansas pitching against that Wichita State offense. That's what I have. UCF I also have as a 2. That's interesting. Do they send them to Gainesville again? Which is what they always do.
Unlike any other.
Except the only thing is they always do it in even years, not odd, but whatever, They played Florida already twice. Beat them twice. Does that factor in? We don't know. They could also go to Tallahassee. They have not played Florida State, but you have SEC teams that can bust there, and so it's very tricky. But I think those are 2 landing spots for UCF. But both are locks. Both probably should be 2 seeds there. The bubble team is South Florida. Ken Erickson and the Bulls did not finish the season well. They ended up losing in the semis in the American tournament to UCF. They lost 3 out of 4 to UCF in the last week of the regular season where they needed 3 wins to win the regular season title. They lost that Sunday game prior to that to East Carolina. Not the best way to finish. They have an RPI that's a little higher than you would like, but they have 3 wins at Wichita State. They have a win at UCF. And of course, they have the great Georgina Korick. I think they're a team that is definitely going to be stressed out on Sunday night. I have them sneaking in. Do you guys have them sneaking in as a 3rd team from the American? Mind you, I think that is it for the American. I don't think Tulsa or anybody – Tulsa has no shot. Nobody else has a shot. I think it's either South Florida and you have 3 teams in, or it's a 2-bid league.
I guess it's me to talk first.
Yes.
I have South Florida in. I think it's very questionable. I think they're one of the last ones in, but I think they're in. In part, again, it is a weak bubble. We're not talking about 10 teams vying for 5 spots here where we have to split hairs. It's a weak bubble. I think South Florida's got enough of a resume to be in that conversation. And I think they've got enough of a history and they've got a star. Because let's be honest, when it gets to those last few, at some point in time, how you've done on the field doesn't go out the window, but it goes on the back burner. Because you've got to figure out, okay, what's the justification for putting in a South Florida? If they're the 63rd team that goes in the field, why are we putting them in? So you've got some good wins you talk about, especially in the conference. You talk about the Wichita one. That's huge.
3 of them on the road at Wichita State.
Exactly, and that's big. But let's say their competition for that 63rd spot also has a sweep over their conference champion. At a certain point, you're going to get into South Florida usually is the tournament team. They've got Corrick, who's going to be good for TV or whatever. And those are not going to make the case. They're not going to break the case, but they might be just the final piece that they need to say, okay, this is the puzzle we're building.
Now, one thing we got to consider, guys, in 2019, Southern Illinois was that 64th team and got placed in Evanston with Northwestern. So don't be surprised if you see something similar with USF this season, especially for the reasons that, Justin, you mentioned. They're a busable team. You could justify them being in. And you have somebody who's Georgina Corrick, who was a unanimous American Pitcher of the Year. You need people. You have the scenario is set up similar to what Southern Illinois did when they snuck in 2019 over the expense of a team like a UNLV or an Illinois, who we thought were going to be in the tournament and ended up being out. So don't be surprised if USF is in specifically because of what happened with Southern Illinois 2 years ago.
I like that comparison for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think that's pretty accurate. I actually that's a pretty good comparison because Southern Illinois kind of snuck in there and kind of surprised people, myself included. But they could bust to Evanston. I think that makes sense. Number one. Number two, it's a great segue because I'm going right to Southern Illinois and the Missouri Valley Conference. Southern Illinois. Thank you very much. Southern Illinois won the Missouri Valley tournament. They beat Northern Iowa in the final. So Coach Blaylock will be back in the tournament. She doesn't have to stress it out like she did 2 years ago. They're in. But could there be more teams from the Valley? That's the big question on Selection Sunday. I have 2 bids, actually, from the Valley. Right now, I have Southern Illinois, and I have Northern Iowa, which nobody has talked about, but quietly just finished on fire the last couple of weeks. They swept Southern Illinois to finish the regular season. They took 2 out of 3 from Illinois State, who won the regular season title. They get to the championship game. They have a star player in Sammy Bunch, who was a finalist throughout the season for Player of the Year. I think Northern Iowa should be in. I have Northern Iowa as one of my last teams in. I think the Valley, again, will be a 2-bid league. Keep this in mind. Southern Illinois can bust to Arkansas as a 3 seed, and Northern Iowa could bust to Columbia, Missouri as a 3 seed as well. If I'm a Missouri Valley team, those are the 2 regionals I would focus on. I don't see them flying a Missouri Valley team elsewhere. So if you're going to get into the tournament from the Missouri Valley, look at Columbia and look at Fayetteville. So if you see, for example, Southern Illinois in Columbia, that's not good news for Northern Iowa or an Illinois State, who's also in the mix, because those 2 teams cannot, from a mileage standpoint, cannot bus to Fayetteville. Okay, so I think the Valley is very interesting, but I like Northern Iowa. I think they have finished very strong, and I have them as a 2-bid lead.
Yeah, they've got Sammy Bunch. You've got a pitcher in Caitlin Packard who's really solid. I mean, you saw that, like you say, down that stretch run, and even today in the tournament championship game, you saw some really, really impressive stuff from her. That was a tight game. It was a 2-0 win for Southern Illinois. I think Northern Iowa, they're very quiet, very understated, but you're right, geographically plays in. They finished hot. We've said it. I've said it a few times, the whole "what have you done for me lately" thing. And we've seen the Missouri Valley get a little love before, like you talked about SIU 2 years ago. I mean, Northern Iowa, I get it. It's not a high-profile team. It's not a big market, etc. But if I'm looking at it and I've got a spot, Northern Iowa's a good bet for it. I like them a lot. I think their body of work is there for what they are. And, I mean, I think they've got some of the qualities we've talked about in some of these other teams that are right on the bubble that might push them over the edge to being in.
Their RPIs in that 50 to 52 range, just a little high, but that's a bubble team. The thing I would worry about if I'm the Valley, Illinois State, by the way, let's mention them. They won the regular season title. They lost to Southern Illinois in the semis. I don't see the Valley getting 3. Now, you could argue that maybe the Illinois State, for example, should be in over Northwestern. You could make that case. But I don't see that. I don't see the committee doing that. I don't see a world, although it'd be great, it'd be funny as heck. I don't see a world where the Missouri Valley ends up with more teams in the Big Ten. But that would be pretty fun if they did. So I think, unfortunately for Illinois State, I think they're out. But let me bring them up. If you're an Illinois State fan, what you hope for is that regular season title carries weight and sneaks you in over a Northern Iowa. That's what it's going to come down to. I don't see 3 going in. It's kind of like a few years ago, Victor. Remember the Mountain West? And what's weird was they picked Boise State over UNLV, even though UNLV finished ahead of Boise State.
Yes.
And they ended up with 2 bids in that year. UNLV got left out. I thought they should have been a 3-bid league. It was a 2-bid league. I think we're in the same boat with the Valley compared to the Mountain West has been in a couple years ago.
Yeah, and if you look at it, Eric, with the resumes of Boise State, UNLV in 2019 compared to Northern Iowa and Illinois State this year, you're going to have very similar images to what we saw with Boise State and UNLV. The fact that Northern Iowa got to the championship game is going to kind of be that ace in their sleeve that can warrant them getting in over an Illinois State. The biggest part of that we have to consider, again, what you talked about, you can bust a Northern Iowa. It's going to be more difficult to bust if you bust an Illinois State, it's going to likely have to beat the Evansville.
Well, Columbia is the place where both of those teams can bust. And by the way, so can Northwestern. Keep that in mind. That to me, Columbia is a critical regional for the Valley. Very critical. They have to get the Columbia. I sound like I'm like John King and CNN on election night. They have to get Columbia. Here, and here. Columbia is key. The Valley will not get 2 bids if they don't at least get Columbia, a team in the Columbia Regional. Southern Illinois could be placed in Fayetteville. They could also be placed in Columbia. If you're the Valley fan, if you're a fan of Illinois State or Northern Iowa, you want Southern Illinois to go to Arkansas. You don't want them to go to Columbia, more than likely. Otherwise you're a 1-bid league. And then the other question you have to worry about is, does the committee put in Iowa, for example, if they were to finish 4th overall in the Big Ten? And again, they could lock that up with a win against Illinois on Sunday. If Iowa is the 4th team, does the committee put in Iowa over Northern Iowa? Boy, would that be a hot topic in that state.
Wow.
But it could. It's not crazy. It's not crazy. So that's something to look for. Or if they get left out, could it be a team like Conference USA with UAB that finished strong with Joe Guthrie, got to the championship game, and can bust to many different places? Do they get left out for a team like UAB? Who knows? But I think that from the Missouri Valley, fascinating night for them to see if they could pull off a 2-bid league once again like they did 2 years ago. I know they're hoping for 3. I don't see 3. I don't see it. I just don't see it. I think you're getting 2, and I think it's a fight between Illinois State and Northern Iowa. I'm going with Northern Iowa because they finished stronger and they got to the championship game. Well, and they have better wins, by the way, better wins in the non-conference. They beat an Iowa State. They played a really good schedule there. I know so did Illinois State. It's close. It's by a hair, but I have Northern Iowa.
Well, and remember, Northern Iowa and Illinois State both had the same path to get to the championship in the tournament. They each had to win 1 game, and they're in the championship. Northern Iowa did it. Illinois State didn't.
Yeah. So that's going to be fascinating on that deal. Conference USA real quick. Western Kentucky won over UAB. The big story there to me, North Texas not getting there. Stunning. No, it stinks not to see Hope Trautwein in the NCAA tournament. We'll see now where Western Kentucky goes. Is Western Kentucky a 3 or a 4 seed? That's going to be an interesting storyline there. Villanova. Shout out to our good friend Bridget Orchard, and more particular, her star 2-way player, Paige Rao, who is a stud. Put her team on her back after losing the opening game of the Big East tournament at Ipid Stores. Got them all the way to the championship game and beat the host team, Connecticut, twice on Saturday, doing it with her bat and with her arm. First time ever that Villanova will be going to the NCAA tournament. Bridget Orchard went to Villanova. That's her alma mater. She got them in. Villanova, a borderline 3-4 seed. Where are they seeded? I have them as a 3, but I could see it either way. But congratulations nonetheless to Villanova. Congratulations to George Washington. They came out of the losers bracket as well. Coach Winkler and company, their RPIs in the high 30s. Are they a 3 or a 4? That's a storyline. But they're in the tournament. South Dakota State Victor, you were worried about Crystal Wood. They were upset by Omaha. They needed to beat them twice today. They did that. They will be going to the NCAA tournament. Well deserved. I'm thankful. I hate conference tournaments at places like the Summit League because it just kind of sometimes you don't get the best team in there. But South Dakota State pulled it out. Are they a 3 seed or a 4 seed? I am as a 3, and I think they're dangerous. They got 2 quality arms. But those are the teams to look at from a 3 to 4 seed line from the automatic qualifiers from those leagues.
I think going back to your point with South Dakota State, they have a win at Wichita State already this season. They beat Kansas. They beat Oregon State. So they know how to play and beat Power 5 opponents. If you're a 2 seed and you see the Jackrabbits in your opening round, take them very seriously because
And if the committee's done, if the committee underseeds them and puts them as a 4, kind of like they did with North Dakota State years back, look out. That could be a dangerous 4-over-1 situation, but I think they should be a 3.
Don't be surprised, Eric. I'm going to give you a little shocker. Don't be surprised if you see South Dakota State as a possible 4 seed in Fayetteville taking on Arkansas. That could be trouble for Mary Hafford Company if that's their opening game.
That would be wild. That would be pretty wild on that. Colonial Jmu obviously in. Are they a 2 or a 3? That'll be interesting considering their limited non-conference schedule based on the administration side. Delaware. That's a story that has been a hot story. Colonial got to the championship game. However, did not go well. Let's just say that.
No.
Got blown out. Their RPIs in the 20s. No team that has had an RPI in the 20s has ever missed the NCAA tournament in this era. I think that is coming to an end on Sunday. I don't believe Delaware is going to make it. In part, they were just not competitive against JMU.
Yeah, both times, Derek. They didn't even put up a run, and we don't even talk about the championship.
They got no hit. Yeah, they got no hit in the first game, and then I don't even remember I don't even want to remember the final score in the second. It was
a lot to nothing.
What was it? There you go.
A lot to nothing. A lot to nothing. It looked like a football score more than a softball score than anything. The thing and a lot of people say, what about Delaware? What about Delaware? You said this, Eric, on our podcast earlier this week. Delaware had to show out well against James Madison if they want to be considered in the field of 64. They did the complete opposite, and I think they've played their way out of the tournament.
Yeah, I just think Jen Steele's done a heck of a job there. I mean, the fact that we're even having this conversation speaks volumes to the job she's done at Delaware. And they're on the rise. They're on the right direction, but this is just not the year. Not yet. There. Good question here. We got a question. Kennesaw State. People asking about Kennesaw State. They beat top 50 teams like UCF, Liberty, Auburn, Miami of Ohio, Western Kentucky. Justin, you and I have gone back on Trent McKay, and I've seen Kennesaw in person when they beat UCF. They're really good. They were up and down this year. RPI in the 57, 58 range. What is it? 1 game over 500. I just don't see a scenario that a committee puts a team from the A-Sun Conference that's 1 game over 500. And Victor, you cover the A-Sun. You and I, how many years have we been talking about the A-Sun as a multiple bid league, and they get kind of left in the altar? Think back to Florida Gulf Coast, 2018, I believe. I think it was 18. Yes, they were a 35 RPI. You had Gainesville and Tallahassee as options, and they didn't get in. I don't see Kennesaw getting in. They were hosting the conference tournament. I think they don't get in. I think the A-Sun's a 1-bid league. I do have Kennesaw State as the first 4 out. I don't think it's insane. The resume is pretty decent. I just think the win-loss record doesn't help them. They are a very friendly geography team, I believe. I think there's multiple places they can bust to, correct, Justin?
Yeah, that's right.
But I have them out. Do you both? Either one of you want to make a case for Kennesaw?
As much as I would like to have Kennesaw in, I think they needed to beat Liberty to get into the tournament, being they had to beat them twice in the A-Sun. The biggest thing, Eric, I think I would say with Kennesaw is that if you were to slot them in, you can bust them to Alabama or Tuscaloosa, or if you have a Georgia host as a 2 seed, you can have Kennesaw possibly be a 3 or possibly have beat them as a 3 or 4 seed in Athens. But to be perfectly honest with you, I don't see any path for the Friday Trip McKay to sneak into the field this year. Great resume, but I don't think it'll be enough.
Justin?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're right on that bubble because they do have a solid resume. The 2 things I think work against them are being one game over 500. That just, when you're in the committee room looking at that, I can't imagine 26 and 25 looks great on that sheet. But number two, that RPI is at the high end of what I think the committee is going to get to. They are going to go higher than they normally would because you do have, I mean, for instance, top 40, Princeton. Princeton's not, they played 3 games. So you have the teams like that. So the RPI is going to have to be adjusted a little bit. And I think Kennesaw is just a little, they're on the very high end of what I think the committee is going to be able to consider. And I think they're going to end up, plus, I mean, ASUN's a hard conference to get 2 in unless 2 of them are just world beaters, and that's not the case. So I think Kennesaw probably is a hard luck loser to my estimation.
Plus, Kennesaw had some losses that you just kind of shake your head. Didn't they drop a game to Stetson and Vic? As I lose Vic there, I was just going to ask you, Vic.
No, I'm still here.
You're still here. All right, we lost your. I miss seeing your face though. That's the only thing.
Yeah. Don't worry. I was just adjusting my camera real quick. Yes, they do have some questionable losses. They did lose at Stetson this year. They did have a loss against Lipscomb, which is not the Lipscomb that we're known from the ASUN Conference in the past few years. So if Kennesaw maybe was like 30, 35 wins, and then they lose to the ASUN final to Liberty, then you could make a stronger case for Lipscomb getting in that large bid with this year being what it is. But your one game over 500, I don't see it. I really don't see it.
26, 25 RPI in that 55 range. They can bust to Tallahassee, Gainesville, among other places. So they are geography friendly. I just wish if they would have gotten to like the 30 win mark, maybe. But I think they're out. Vic, did you? I know you had plans, like a bunch of questions for both of us. Didn't you have like some questions you had in and out? I don't know if it was in and out or other stuff. I know you had some stuff in mind.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, guys, was I don't know if you had a chance to talk about this while I was dealing with my technical issues. South Carolina. I feel South Carolina is going to be in. I think the fact that South Carolina, if you look at South Carolina's schedule at the end of the day, their schedule and the teams that they have those wins against UCF. They have the win against Auburn twice in a neutral site, which is going to be huge for them. And you mentioned this stat, Eric, about teams who are 500 over in the SEC
with an RPI of 50 or better, and you lose me again. God.
No, we hear it. What? No, we hear you.
you.
We hear you. But we like Vic getting upset reaction now. That's good. He's figuring that out.
He was on a roll too.
I know. It was. We were really doing. Hey, we're live here, Vic. We're live. Live. Oh boy, Vic, we can hear you. I feel like I'm Beano Cook here all of a sudden. We could hear you, Vic. We could hear you. Yeah, South Carolina's gonna probably be in 500 record. By the way, though, I mean, Kennesaw can bust also to Clemson. Just to throw that out there as well. Look, I'm not a favor. I'm not a fan of teams 500 getting in, but history says they're going to get in. And if they're at a 50 RPI, they're probably going to get in. Would I be upset if they're not? No. Would I be upset if Northwestern didn't get in? No. But I also, have to accept reality. And I think reality is that they'll probably get in those deals. But I think it's close. I think it'll be close. I think Kennesaw's it's kind of a unique team. Illinois State, I think, is on the outside looking in. We have discussed this fourth option for the Big Ten, assuming they get 3 in. Can Iowa finish strong here, make a late case? I know that's their motivation. I don't think it'll work, but you just never know with a committee, Justin. You just never know because there's always a surprise or two every year in the Selection Sunday. What surprise will that be is always the question.
Well, and by the way, in terms of South Carolina, I think they're safely in because they're in the SEC. If the SEC, I think they're a better team this year, better record, but I think we agree they're safely in. But I think it's because they're in the SEC and because their schedule is so tough. In terms of surprises, I still think the Big Ten, everybody's waiting with bated breath to see how the committee views the Big Ten. Do they get 2? Do they get 3? Do they get 4? Are they seen as hard luck because of what their conference did? Are they seen what I feel is appropriately as just not a great overall picture to be able to benefit them? I mean, that's going to be the tail of the tape tomorrow because if the Big Ten is seen positively, your Northern Iowas, your Troys, your South Floridas should start sweating. Because I think if I'm looking at this and if I'm putting this tournament together, Troy, South Florida, Northern Iowa, bodies of work, what they have accomplished is better than at least 11 teams in the Big Ten. I would argue possibly 12 teams in the Big Ten. And I think those three deserve to be in over a Northwest, over in Iowa, over in Illinois, maybe over in Northwestern. But is the committee going to agree with that?
It's the biggest question. The Big Ten's going to. I'm really fascinated to see what happens with the Big Ten and how they do it. How do they seed? Do they host? Do they give Michigan a host? Do they put 2 teams in? Do they put 3 teams in? Do they put 4 teams in? I think those are very interesting questions. Other leagues, a quick of note: Mountain West, Fresno's the automatic champion. UNLV, man, they beat Fresno 2 out of 3, but got swept by Nevada Reno at the end there. I think that knocked them out of consideration there. Tough for Christy Fox, so close. But they're still in the right track, but just I think are going to miss out as well. And I think that pretty much covers all the teams we think are in the mix for the field. Southeast Missouri. Yeah, Southeast Missouri, maybe some people think in the Ohio Valley, but you don't believe so, Justin. You think that's a really long shot.
Yeah, I mean, I like Southeast Missouri, and I could watch Rachel Anderson play softball until the end of time and be just fine with it. That kid, well, she's not a kid anymore, but I mean, she can hit, she can field, she can run. I mean, I would love to see Southeast Missouri be in there and those seniors, Anderson, Ellis, and all that, get to end their careers in the tournament. They have like a 58 RPI heading in today, but I don't see the Ohio Valley being more than one bid league. Even with the 58 RPI, I think SEMO kind of suffers from the same thing I think Kennesaw suffers from. It's just being on that high end of where the committee will consider.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that on that. All right, well, you can check out, Justin, tell the audience where they can check out my final bracketology projections. When does it come out and what they can expect from it?
All right, so bracketology 8.0, which will break down the field, the automatic qualifiers, last in, first out, some observations, all that will be out tomorrow morning. 8.1 will be the free version for anybody in the world to see. That's going to be our regional projections. And that'll be out when you wake up Sunday morning. Go to justinsworldsb.com, look for bracketology 8.0, bracketology 8.1, and, check out the bubble watch while you're there and see how things have progressed as the weeks go on. We might add to that for tomorrow, too. I mean, might just make it a clean sweep.
I love that. And, of course, Victor, we'll be back on here live Sunday night for the selection show, live reaction show. We're going to try to do this live, folks. So who knows what viewer discretion could be advised for that. Right, Vic?
Yes, we'll be fine. I do want to, by the way, I don't know if Justin had a chance to mention this, but also on Justin's World, we're going to have some stuff on Division 2 because, believe it or not, they're having their selection show Sunday night at 10 p.m.
All right. I'm glad you brought that up. I'm going to give you both a few minutes here to discuss D2. We were going to do this earlier, but, we technical issue. For whatever reason, and if both of you haven't answered this, Division 2 is also going to have their selection night 10 o'clock on Sunday night. Why? What are you doing? So with that in mind, the floor is yours for both of you. Discuss as this. What are some of the storylines you guys are looking forward to from a Division 2 standpoint?
I think for me, the two things is going to be, number one, the South Central region, which is going to be absolutely loaded with talent this year. The Lone Star Conference is going to have 5 of the 6 teams in. West Texas A&M as a 4 seed won the conference tournament today. Colorado Mesa is going to try and upset the apple cart and try and go around some things, see how that's going to work. Can Augustana retain the national championship? They're out of the Central region. They're the number 1 seed. We'll look out for Jason Anderson in Southern Arkansas. They're going to be a problem. And the South region, I cannot legitimately say who can win that region. You can make a case for Auburn Montgomery, who won the Gulf South Conference on their first try. But Austin State's going to be hosting. You got Rollins with Scheinfeld and Ashley Worrell, probably the best 2-pitcher combination in the nation that nobody's talking about. And then, of course, Eric, you joked with me about this all show long with my technical difficulties. How, as a conference, have your 2 teams reschedule a 4-game series that got postponed back in freaking March? How did I know there are kids watching. I'm gonna keep myself relatively calm because I probably
heard your
use up all
potty
my
mouth.
energy with all the technical issues. And
We did hear your potty mouth recently.
yes, exactly. My
Yes.
apologies for those of you
Hot
watching.
mic, you're a vet at this. Yes, hot mic.
Sorry, that is my apologies. I must be better about that. But yet and still,
that doesn't mean that language
bothers
won't change though tomorrow night. But you know,
I'll make sure I'm muted if that does happen. But that doesn't change the fact that there are a lot of great stories in Division II. They're going to announce their top 10 finalists for the National Player and Pitcher of the Year probably within the next week or so. There's a lot of great talent, but I still don't understand. How do you have a selection? What geniuses thought, hey, let's get some attention. Let's have our selection show at 10 p.m. after the D1 selection show instead of our normal Monday morning at 10 a.m. And also, the kicker is that you're going to decide you're going to have the selection show Sunday night, and then you're going to start some regionals as early as Wednesday? What? Really? Wednesday?
And the thing is, these regionals, and of course the reason they're backing them up is because they're skipping supers. But that makes it even more interesting because you're not playing for a berth in the supers against 3 other teams. You're playing a whole bevy of teams to go to the World Series.
Mm-hmm.
And
here's the thing, Justin. We haven't had an official announcement of what the actual 16 format is going to be like. Is it going to be the top 2 regional seeds get buys, and is it going to be a double elimination? Is it going to be? We haven't gotten.
Are you serious? We don't know this still.
No, we don't know this.
Right. That's okay. So that's crazy to me. All right. So here, we're gonna go fourth wall here on the show before we wrap this up. We're gonna be on live 8:45.
Oh boy.
Eastern. All right. So we're gonna be live. We're gonna break down live as the watch along with the selection show. We encourage you to watch. Megan Turk is going to join us during at some point in the show, probably after the selections are done. But my question to you, Victor, are you going to break down the D2 selections live on the show? Because I'm worried. I'm worried of what could be said as that unfolds. Now, I will say I have to step out during the live show at some point. I have to cover a post-game Zoom post-selection show Zoom. So I'll be stepping out for 15, 20 minutes. That might be when you're going to talk Division II. My question is, am I going to be okay leaving you alone to possibly talk Division II as that unfolds?
If I bring over a few friends to talk about the Division I, we won't have to worry about talking about Division II.
Is that a hint?
Stay tuned for that.
Ooh, got friends here. All right.
Stay tuned. We're gonna let's just say we'll be up drinking some coffee on Sunday morning, making a few calls.
I like it. I'm looking forward to that. All right. Last words before we call it a night. We've been on for a while, so I appreciate everybody tuning in.
Well, y'all have been on for a while. I've been all over the place.
Better late than never.
Touche.
Last thoughts, Vic. First with you, and then Justin, and then we'll wrap it up.
I feel the biggest question for me going into this selection show is did anybody want to get the 7 and 8 national seeds to host supers along with regionals? There are 5 or 6 different teams that we could have mentioned as an opportunity to get the 7 and 8 seed, and they really didn't do anything this weekend to warrant getting one of those final 2 top 8 seeds to host. So who does the committee value? Do they value name? Do they value RPI? Do they value who you've beaten? I don't know. That's going to be interesting for me on Selection Sunday. And number 2, I'm just saying this because it might happen. What if you have Michigan hosting and Duke as a 2? You have teacher Marissa Young, Coach Hutch. I'll just leave that little food for thought for you people out there.
Justin?
Well, I ran stats on 2 teams, and I said them both earlier. LSU played 31 games against the top 25. They won 15 of them. Toughest schedule you're going to find. Strength of schedule is insane. Washington played 6 teams above 200 in RPI. They lost to number 94. They lost to number 119. I ran the numbers looking at the 8 versus 9, who gets what. Those are the 2 teams I came out with. I present them both without comment.
All right. Got me there. Hey, let's just try to enjoy the Sunday night. Hey, we got a selection show. We didn't have one last year. We did a make-believe selection show last year at this time, which still to this day I'm still getting heat about, which is kind of wild that I'm getting criticized over.
How does the chairperson's seat feel, Mr. Lopez?
It was weird, a little different, but let's enjoy it. Empty suit. Yeah, he was. I thought he didn't do that bad of a job, but apparently some people disagreed with him. But let's enjoy this selection Sunday. We didn't have it last year, a couple of years. Let's enjoy it. We have it. I feel like hopefully the committee does a good job. This is a tough one, though. This year's a tough one. It is tricky. The RPI is out of whack. I think Victory makes some great points. I think we're going to learn a lot about what they think about the RPI. What do they think about the Big Ten? How is that all going to play out? It's a fascinating draw. I think it's the hardest year to seed this tournament, without question. You know, from a hosting standpoint, who's a 1, who's a 2, who's a 3, who's a 4 even. You've got some debates there. Is a Villanova a 3 or a 4? Things like that. I think it's a fascinating show. I hope, though, we enjoy it. It's okay to be upset. It's okay to disagree. Let's just be glad we have it. Everybody's done a heck of a job getting to this point. Let's be honest, a lot better than some of the other sports. So let's just hope and enjoy this, man. It's been fun. This was a fun week of softball. It's been great. We've missed it. And, boys, this was a pleasure to do this. The technical issues aside, I thought you both sounded great.
Notwithstanding.
Yeah, you both sounded great. And we'll both do this again Sunday night if you guys don't mind.
Works for me.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? We may have some friends tag along with us on Sunday night as well.
Vic, tell the audience where they can find out those details for Sunday night.
That's why you need to follow us, ladies and gentlemen. You see now on the ticker, follow us at Inner Circle SB on our Facebook and Twitter pages. We'll have all the latest on who we're maybe having on the show. We already confirmed Dr. Megan Turk will be joining us on the show. We'll be working on trying to get guests for tomorrow's show as well. And for the bracketology and the Bubble Watch, go to @JustinsWorldSB and JustinsWorldSB.com. Free and premium articles of bracketology available tomorrow morning. Go there, save it, digest it. We'll answer all your questions tomorrow night. Again, 8:45. We're gonna start. We're gonna give our final thoughts. Who we think is gonna be the top 4 seed, and hopefully we may know who the top 4 seeds are gonna be alphabetically if tradition holds around 8:30-ish. So we'll be on at 8:45 to share our thoughts if that's the case. If the committee got it right, if they're off to a good start, or if Eric Lopez is going to have a moment like he did that infamous year when Minnesota did not get to host, even despite going 54-3.
And that show will be turned into the podcast for Monday, we hope as well. Yes. But who knows? Who knows? Should be a lot of fun. So thanks to everybody that tuned in. Thanks to everybody that asked questions. Feel free to keep sending questions. Some of you will be watching this on delay, on archive, getting maybe before the selection show. That's cool on our YouTube page. I've seen our subscription numbers go up. You can also check out our interviews with Megan Willis, Kat Osterman, among others. We have a lot of interviews, too, on our YouTube page as well as on our archives with a lot of head coaches that are in the field, like a Krista Wood, like a Bridget Orchard from years past. You can look it up there among many, many, many names there. Should be an exciting night on Sunday night. So for Justin McLeod, for Victor Anderson, I'm Eric Lopez. We hope you've enjoyed this live edition of In the Circle as we get you set for selection this Sunday night. We'll talk to you at 8:45 Eastern on Sunday night and get you set as they unveil the 60-14 field for the 2021 NCAA tournament. Good night, and we'll talk to you on Sunday.
All right, we should be clear.